Okay, inside the last 22 minutes of the SportsMax Zone now for this Thursday, and we're back to talk some track and field. Embattled South African runner Caster Semenya and her legal team are raising concerns yet again after the release of reports from World Athletics apparently conceding that findings which led to Semenya and some other athletes not participating in the Tokyo 2020 Games were in fact misleading. Semenya and her legal team, obviously upset, have also questioned the timing of this information coming 9 days after the conclusion of the Tokyo Games. In the new findings, the pair of scientists, Stéphane Bermon and Pierre-Yves Garnier, two university and research experts, said the following on the matter. This is what the report says. To be explicit, there is no confirmatory evidence for casualty in the observed relationships reported. We acknowledge that our 2017 study was exploratory. With this in mind, we recognize that statements in the paper could be misleading by implying a casual reference. Female athletes with high testosterone levels have a significant competitive advantage over those with low testosterone in 400 meters, 400 hurdles, 800 meters, the hammer throw, and also the pole vault. Now, this 2017 study did in fact bar the two-time Olympic gold medalist Semenya from taking part in the 400 meters and 800 meters unless she took hormone-reducing drugs, while Semenya and her team await a hearing at the European Court of Human Rights. This is the message that her lawyer, Gregory Knott, has released on behalf of his client. Here's what Knott says. It's coming up shortly, I think. Is it? Yeah. World Athletics have recently given notice of their wish to intervene in the European Court of Human Rights proceedings, and we would hope that they will now support setting aside the regulations. It is more than surprising that World Athletics did not reveal this evidence before the recent Tokyo Olympics and allow Caster Semenya to defend her 800-meter title. Well, joining us to discuss this contentious issue, senior athletics writer and journalist Leighton Levy. Leighton, we remember having a lot of discussions in the past couple of years about Semenya and her troubles here. We have always acknowledged that the IAAF, well, the World Athletics was going down a slippery slope here because there are a lot of things that could be challenged. As it stands now, what do you make of these latest reports from these scientists representing World Athletics and where this may lead Caster Semenya and her attorneys?
Well, for Semenya and her lawyers, it means a very good shot at winning those lawsuits and getting back into the sport, deservedly so. Because to understand how potentially nefarious this is, or what it looks like on the surface, you have to go back to 2015, when Duti Chand, that Indian sprinter, if you remember, she also competed in Tokyo. When she was banned for that similar DSD classification and took the then IAAF to CAS, and CAS then said to the IAAF, there is nothing here to say that the evidence that you're putting forward suggests that athletes who have higher level, female athletes that have higher level of testosterone have a distinct advantage over athletes who are considered normal, right? So they gave them 2 years to come up with evidence, come up with data to support their claim. These two researchers then put together this botched report to then, make the case for the IAAF, of course, World Athletics, and then, of course, it was backed up by the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and, of course, validated by the British Journal of Sports Medicine, all of which was a farce, because when you look at the data points that are incorrect, there are more than 200 incorrect data points in the research. In the 400 alone, of the 67 data points that they used to determine that athletes had a specific advantage if they had a higher testosterone level, 22 of them were inaccurate. In fact, some of them were even made up based on what we've been the reporting on it that we've seen so far. So all of this, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And of course, it ruins the credibility of the British Journal of Sports Medicine, and of course brings into question the integrity of World Athletics. It's a very sad situation, and as I said to you before, there is nothing to suggest, because look at it, the two recent examples. They said that Mamba could not run the 400 after she ran 48.54. as a 18-year-old, as a 17-year-old. And they told her that she couldn't run the 400 because, of course, that between the 400 and the mile was the events that gave you a distinct advantage if you had higher testosterone levels. So they put her down to the 200, and then she ran 22:11, which equaled the world junior record. Then 21:97, which broke the record, and then ran even faster in the final, 21:81. So what are they saying? They don't know what they're saying. They've made up a lot of data to try to support a claim that is without validity, and that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, but to be fair to World Athletics, they did get the support of CAS when the Semenya group went to challenge the ruling. So was it that the Court of Arbitration for Sport were guided by a lot of the misinformation that you're speaking of?
Exactly, that's what happened. CAS was guided by that faulty report. So they had no other option because there was no other information available for CAS to use as a point of reference, a term of reference for them to make their decisions. As it turns out, that basis that they used was faulty. And I think it's wrong. And I think, you sometimes don't want to bring ethnicity into this whole argument. But look at the athletes that they're targeting. Just look at the athletes that they're targeting. Yet there was an athlete in the Olympics who was a transgender athlete who was allowed to compete. You wonder what color that athlete was? I mean, look, we're not saying that this is the case, but on the surface of it, it certainly brings into question a lot of decisions that are made by World Athletics and the people who govern the sport, who try to keep athletes out for the way they were born. These athletes were not injecting any steroids into their systems. They were not doing anything nefarious. They were born this way. Look, over time, we all grew up thinking that there were two specific classifications of humans, male and female. But as time has passed, we've come to discover that there are areas in between those two classifications that we haven't fully come to grips with yet. And some of the athletes perhaps fall into those categories. And I think maybe the best option going forward is to create a category for these athletes for major championships. Yeah. Because until they're able to figure it out, I think that's the fairest way, because it gives them a chance to compete and to participate and not be sidelined like they did Semenya and Nian Saba and others. Yeah.
On a point of clarity though, Leighton, because what the World Athletics had said initially, they, based on their scientific reports, which you're saying a lot of holes have been bored in them now, that the decided advantage that they had would be confined to some events, 400 to a mile, and they spoke of the hammer and the 400 hurdles and so on, some of those events. But are you suggesting that, based on the stories coming out now, that the higher testosterone levels that some of these women have in their system is going to give them advantage across the board and not just in specific events? Or are you suggesting that they should be clear to just compete, period?
Until there's a specific corroborated study that says specifically that this is the case, I think they should be allowed to compete. There was concern over Masalingi running in against Jamaica's Tina Clayton today in the World Under-20 Championships, given her elevated levels of testosterone in the 100 meters. She came second by a city block. There is no evidence to suggest that these people have... Look, okay, let's use the 800, for example, that Semenya used to run. The time that I think Mo ran and won the Olympic title, wasn't that within the ballpark of what Semenya used to run, 155s? Where is the evidence that these athletes are at an advantage? Because it does not present in real life. They claim that it's between a 1.8 and 2.7% increase in terms of advantage. But we have not seen that, and it's one of the reasons why CAS threw out the ban against Shan back in 2015, because there was no evidence to show that these athletes had a distinct advantage over anybody else. People talk about the fact that Semenya was run undefeated for so long. Edwin Moses ran undefeated for 10 years. There is always a counter argument to the baseless claims that are being made to try to keep athletes out of competing because they are dominant and somebody didn't like it and they're complaining. And I think it's wrong, Lance. I mean, look, if there is specific evidence that says definitively that you have an advantage of doing this over another athlete who is at a lower testosterone level, then fine. But the evidence is not there. There is no evidence. This is a flawed report. And of course, they made some adjustments now. And then the World Athletics is standing behind this new claim. But they have no option, because otherwise they're going to be embarrassed and be open up to all kinds of legal actions, because then it's discrimination for one. And of course, as Human Rights Watch says, it violates these athletes' rights. They're asking them to take steroids to lower their testosterone levels or to undergo medical procedures to make themselves normal. What is normal? And that's the thing that they have not been able to determine. What is normal? Michael Phelps has a situation where his body does not build up, lactic build-up in his body is not as intense as in other athletes. Are they banning him from swimming? No, they didn't ban him from swimming. That's how he was born. He has double joints in all over his body. Did they ban him because of that? That's how he was. That's his genetic makeup. These athletes are similar. Yeah. And I don't think they should be targeting them just because they're different.
Definitely, Leighton. And of course, the timing of this release is something that we have to talk about. It came 9 days after the Tokyo Olympics. Of course, Caster Semenya didn't even get the opportunity to defend her Olympic title. So how is she reimbursed, if so at all? You know, these are questions that a lot of people will be asking.
Well, that's for the European Court of Justice to determine. And of course, I think ultimately CAS again with this new information now, because they robbed her of a year of competition where she could be earning probably hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars because of her status as a two-time Olympic champion. And they told her that she couldn't compete because of these ridiculous findings that were so flawed. Of course, I had to release it after the Olympics, because if I had it before, then it has greater implications, because then they would have to allow her in and then egg on their faces, facing legal action because of the clear discrimination that seems to be right now on the surface, that this was the intent from the beginning. Because remember the IAAF or World Athletics tested Caster Semenya back in 2012, I think it was, and then they determined that she was female. So why all of a sudden now it was a situation where all of a sudden, because she's dominant, then they had to find a way to then reduce her testosterone levels. They themselves determined that she was a woman.
And Leighton, if we were to look at it from an ethical standpoint, you know, okay, you can take drugs to enhance your performances. That's illegal. But they're telling you that you can take things drugs to reduce your performance. What about the overall well-being of a person? Because let's just say you reduce your testosterone, a person like Caster Semenya, but we don't know how that would affect her mental well-being, how it would affect her brain, and in so doing her health as a person.
Her overall health, because remember, it's not just the testosterone, you know. In some instances, they're requesting that athletes do medical procedures, surgeries, to reduce their testosterone levels. So you're asking these athletes to physically modify themselves to fit into their classification of what they deem to be normal. And that's a human rights violation. You can't tell people that they aren't who they are.
And
it's wrong.
Yeah, and of course the main question that comes out of this discussion with the information that has come to hand, do we scrap the rules that are in place, or do we start all over again? We go back to the drawing board and we try to figure out the science.
There's a suggestion that they scrap the rules until they can come up with something concrete, something that says this is specifically what it is. There are no gray areas. Until then, the rules have to be scrapped, thrown out, because they should not have been in place in the first place. And I think it's wrong. And Lance knows this, because I've always been on the side of Semenya, because I think if that's the way you're born, Bolt was 6'5" with legs, like almost 5'11" of legs. He covered 9 inches more each stride when he ran 100. Isn't that how he was born? Isn't that the advantage that genetics and biology gave him? Then why should anybody else change the way they were born just to fit into what people think should be normal? I think it's wrong. It's wrong, and always be, and it will be wrong.
All right, Leighton, this is a very contentious issue, and it will not end here, because as you mentioned earlier on, science is developing and discovering new things, and
every day.
The black and white that we had seen 40, 50 years ago, we're not seeing that anymore, and there are a lot of grays and in-betweens, and I think that is something that they've got to grapple with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
I can tell you stories about my friends in the U.S. Army who went to Singapore many years ago and picked up what he thought was a woman, and then went to the hotel to find out that she actually was both.
Oh my, well, this is a
this how
terrific show.
people were.
Yeah.
This is how people were. This is how people were born. Huh? And until, if you're not able to separate them in terms of that classification of male and female, maybe it's time they start considering creating a new category for athletes.
Yeah.
Those athletes who are different in terms of sexual
Yeah,
development. allow them to compete.
we're going to leave it here, Leighton, but the fact that you just said that is suggesting to me that there is something for you uneasy about seeing Semenya competing against some women who don't look like her.
No, I think
No, but I'm
Semenya
just
is
saying, you
fine.
say if you are saying that maybe we have to go to a different level of separation, it
Yeah,
sounds to me
if-
that a part of you is accepting that if they're allowed to compete, there is something unequal about the competition anyway.
I did not. I'm just saying that that's a possibility.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing.
Okay.
Actually, you heard me say on the show before
Yes.
that Semenya should be allowed to run because I don't think anything was wrong with her
All right.
being dominant in an event.
Okay, all right, Leighton, we've got to leave it there. This discussion won't end today, I'm
You can
sure.
visit Lance at the office and you all can have the discussion.
Yeah, we'll be back with more on the Zone. Interactive is up next.
Bye.